my message to landscapers is you should get a referral anytime you add value. But we add value when we give a quote, right? You've heard from our mutual customers or landscapers in general how difficult it is for their customers to even get someone to show up and give them a quote. Handing someone a quote is super valuable. You should get a referral then, right? I've been referred productively from people who have not bought from me.
Welcome to the Landscapers Business Growth Podcast. My name is John Giacotto, and I'm your host. We've got Neil Glatt with us here today. Neil is the co-founder of GrowTheBench.com, which provides online training for the landscaping and snow industries. Before venturing into coaching, Neil helped grow Case Snow Management from annual revenues of $1 million to $40 million in sales. Neil has also spoken at the National Association of Landscape Professionals conferences. Neil, thank you very much for joining us at the Landscapers Business Growth Podcast.
Yeah, absolutely. My pleasure, John.
So, to start, maybe you could tell our listeners a bit about kind of your background and what led you to start Grow the Bench.
Yeah, well, I grew up and I just wanted to be a sales guy. And I graduated college in 2009, which was not a great time to find a job anywhere. So I pivoted from my dream of pharmaceutical sales, and I ended up in this industry instead. And for 7 years, I worked with Case Snow Management, taking them from, like you said, one pickup truck and $1 million in sales to more than $40 million a year in snow only revenue. And that was super fun. And then decided to kind of conclude that chapter. I was ready for a change and something else, and had to make a really tough decision to leave all my best friends and that company that I was able to help build, and started coaching and consulting. And one of the things that we found out pretty quickly was I was able to spend a lot of time with owners and senior managers and do great work with sales leaders. But there's a whole organization of people who I never really got to interact with. And so that was kind of the start for Grow the Bench, was a way to supplement that education with a micro learning 15-minute video basis. There's a few hundred of them on Grow the Bench now, and that was a great pivot. But most of the time now that I spend with people is just helping them find salespeople and helping those salespeople sell more.
Gotcha. And a lot of your content on Grow the Bench is really geared around landscaping and snow. It's all industry specific, right? So your kind of core expertise is really how do you build a better sales process for the landscaping and snow management industries?
Yeah, sometimes we're building sales processes. Sometimes we're hiring salespeople, and then sometimes I'm actually coaching sales managers and salespeople directly. Those are sort of the three ways that I personally interact with organizations from a sales competency standpoint today.
Gotcha. And so the typical landscaping company that you see, what are the common things that you see over and over again as far as mistakes in their sales approach?
There's so many, John.
There's so many. So let's start off with talking about the how landscapers are going about their actual sales process once they get in front of a customer. So forget about the prospecting piece.
Sure.
They're in front of a customer and they're talking to that customer.
They most of them don't have a process. Usually if they do, they're not asking enough questions. Really, most companies don't have a target that they're even trying to shoot for. So if I were to ask your average landscape or landscape salesperson, who's the best customer that you want? They don't have that profile, right? Or it's super generic, like, oh, commercial properties. Yeah, but where physically? Yeah, but spending how much financially, right? Yeah, but what do they care about emotionally? Why are they buying from you, right? And so they don't have a reference point for if it's good or not. So what that means is they're usually providing quotes to people who have no interest or no ability to buy from them, which leads to a lot of wasted time and a lot of subpar sales. Or their customer doesn't really care about what they have to offer specifically. And so they end up getting negotiated down on rates and competing based on cost, and there's not enough profit, right? And so it's not enough sales and not enough profit in those sales because there's no target, there's no focus, there's no process to get to that level. Or they're just submitting bids. That's their process, right? and they're not qualifying at all. They're not trying to stand out or differentiate themselves, or they don't know how to. So that's one big problem. The other really big problem that I see all the time is sales, quote unquote sales in the landscape industry is actually everything, right? So like when I got into sales, it was to go sell. And we know from research, there's 21 core competencies of a sales job that we have to do, right? There's certain things that salespeople have. It's a real job, right? Like a sales job is a job all by itself. But then in landscaping, we say, yeah, you're going to do all those sales activities, right? You're going to generate leads. You're going to call on people. You're going to do discovery meetings. And we want you to have horticulture knowledge. We want you to be a landscaper too, or horticulturist also, right?
Right.
And by the way, you have to estimate. You have to create your own proposals. And you have to know how much things cost and how to manage a job. Oh, and you have to renew that person and do customer service and project management. Like, wait a second, how many jobs is this, man? 6, 7
Right.
jobs? And then we're surprised when they're not as good at all of them, which happens over and over again.
And in the landscaping industry, there's so many people on the smaller end of the spectrum, the chuck and the trucks just doing it all themselves. Right. Right. So how do you see, how do you find that landscapers typically evolve in terms of their sales knowledge? Is it just kind of winging it and they don't get better, or, what the successful ones, how they who aren't natural born salespeople, but build a successful company to scale it? How do they do that?
There's 2 paths, right? One is they say, you know what? I didn't start my career as a salesperson. I started as a landscaper, but the sales stuff makes sense to me, right? Like I enjoy aspects of it. When we take an assessment around sales, we see that they have some potential or natural talent, or at least some good beliefs that they've grown up with. And we say, okay, we can teach you the skills, right? So that's one pathway is, hey, and I'm thinking of one specific client I have in the Twin Cities who has this. The owner never thought of himself as a sales guy, but we took the assessment and there's a lot of potential there. He just never taught anything. So we just teach him all the sales skills. Every week he and I get on a Zoom like this and I give him coaching. We talk through specific opportunities. We've done all the strategy work, and then I hold him accountable for the goals that we set, right? And so every week he's got to dial the phone 70 times. He's got to take 8 meetings, and he's got to generate 6 proposals, and he's got to win 3. And so that's the plan. And so we've developed the skills because he has the supporting beliefs and behaviors, right? The other way that people are really successful is they say, hey, Neil, I got into this industry. I love being outdoors. I love doing a good job for people. I don't like sales. I think salespeople are all terrible. They're all money driven and kind of crazy. And I have no interest in doing that. Go hire me somebody, or go hire me somebody and manage them for me. And they just realize that the reason why they haven't had success is because they really hate this, and they should just give the job to someone else.
It's not a hat they should be wearing.
Correct. Yeah. And so I think that, my goal is always, hey, let's just help you figure out what you really want to do, which one, maybe 2 hats you can wear, and let's simplify this and focus on just one thing. Right. And I think that the people that I've encountered in any role, in any company, in any industry are the ones who aren't trying to do too much. They're just trying to do one thing really, really great.
Right. Right. And so as far as, the smaller landscaper out there who's, like, what are some of the things they could do to kind of refine so once they dial in kind of their target demographic, their customer avatar, they understand who they're targeting, right? And like, what are some of the things they could do when they're on a sales call? Some tangible things they could do when they're on a sales call that would help the process go better.
Yeah. Well, I think one thing they can do is have the right mindset. And for me, that mindset is usually equal, right? So a lot of salespeople or owners trying to sell are acting subservient to their customer. They're trying to be, or prospect. They're not a customer, right? They're trying to be nice. They're trying not to offend. and their demeanor is very different than, say, when they purchase a new truck or a new mower, right? When they purchase a new truck or a new mower, they walk in and they're respectful, but they're not subservient, right? They negotiate a lot harder with a seller than they do with a buyer. And I think that they should have the same professional demeanor all the time. I would eliminate words like just. I'm just calling to see if you're looking to switch. I would eliminate words like follow up. Hey, John, it's Neil. I wanted to follow up with you. What is that? Right? That's nothingness, and it just signals weak subservience. And I would eliminate customer service. I would advocate that customer service is for customers, the people who have given us money, right? So when you give me $1, now you get all the service. When you haven't yet, you don't. You're not entitled to a quote. You're not entitled to information or education. That comes after the sale. And if we can understand that, then we start to sell a lot better.
So you don't believe in unpaid consulting?
I do not. In fact, I charge a lot for my consulting.
So, but that's typical of like most sales processes in most industries, right? People do a lot of unpaid consulting to try to show their knowledge to help close a job.
Yeah.
But you're saying don't do that. Don't go away everything.
The mentality is like, wow, if this person thinks that I'm so smart, they'll buy from me. But that's not true, right? You have to understand why your customer is buying from you. And it's always to solve a real problem for them, right? Not because of some attribute or some piece of knowledge that you have. Now, if that knowledge allows you to solve the problem, well, then we can connect that value. But they don't really care what you know or don't know. They care to the extent that you can solve their problems. And so, what problems are they facing? It really changes. There's a lot of consolidation happening in our industry right now from private equity groups, right? And you're seeing a lot of contracts go out for even less than they did 7 years ago when I was in the industry. And I think that, I see on all these Facebook groups that a lot of these listeners are probably also a part of, people just railing. Why would this company ever hire this national provider? What's wrong with them? Well, they don't really care about the service, right? And so your ability to do better on site isn't actually meaningful at all. When I was selling to a lot of those same customers, their concerns were totally different than service on site. There was a minimum standard quality that they had to have, but it was low, right? What they really wanted was reporting, visibility. They wanted accountability for on-site. They wanted equal spend per location, regardless of different weather. They just had different concerns at that high level decision making with the people who are giving me the contracts. One thing that they wanted is, one customer wanted was really quick problem resolution, right? So the only thing that we were graded on was how quickly we could put out fires, not how many fires there were. And so when you can understand that different customers want different stuff, if you're a smaller local provider and you're not going to provide all that reporting, all that tech savvy thing, and you're going to try and thrive on communication and high quality work, there's a market for that, but you got to find out what it is, right? I'll tell you, when I hire a landscaper for my house personally, where I am right now, I don't want good communication. I want no communication. I want to write one check at the beginning of the year and you just keep my yard looking good. Not great, but good. I don't want to deal with this. I want this to be a problem that goes away entirely. And the best landscapers I've personally ever had are the ones who came in and didn't talk to me. They didn't text me. They didn't send me photos. That's what I, as a buyer, wanted. There's a market for that. You got to find out what it is.
Right. So how granular would you get with figuring out your ideal customer profile, your customer avatar?
I like 6 levels of qualification, right? So one is, we're targeting a specific segment. That could be HOA, that could be homeowners, that could be medical, could be industrial, could be office parks or institutional. And then the second level of qualification is going to be geographic. And that I get hyper specific on. I want a map with a circle drawn, and I don't want you going one step over that line, right? So I'm up in the Boston area, we might say I'm targeting homeowners inside of the 128 loop, right? That's our major highway. We're targeting homeowners west of I-95, right? We're targeting homeowners in Middlesex County. And that's just very specific. It's whatever we need to say to make that fit perfect, right? Here's the 5 towns. And then we need a qualification about what they value, right? So I believe every company does 1 or 2 things really well, and that suggests who they should sell to if that's going to be their competitive advantage or their differentiator, right? So we're targeting homeowners in Middlesex County who value what we have to offer. And that could be the best horticultural knowledge. That could be a one source solution, right, for all of our services. That could be xeriscaping. That could be native plant, like whatever it is, right? So that's 3 levels. And then it's financial level. So who annually spend at least, and then we need the dollar amount that we're going to expect them to spend on a regular basis. And then we need the service that we're doing, right, on landscaping services. So we're targeting homeowners in Middlesex County who value native plant selection and annually spend $20,000 a year on landscaping and maintenance services, for example.
Gotcha. And so once somebody defines this really, these 6 levels, these 6 attributes of who they're targeting, do you usually have them go all in on changing all of their branding, all of their websites, that it just showcases they do that very specific niche? Or do you kind of use that as a test and say, okay, let's do some marketing and some prospecting, some sales around, this specific, these, 6 areas, and test it out before you kind of go all in on changing everything? So that, like, how do you approach that?
Yeah. So, when we're building those target markets, the question is, who's your ideal client? Who's your best client? Who's your most profitable client? Let's figure that target out. And then really this is just the template, right? So the way I think about it is I think about a dartboard. We just defined the bullseye of the dartboard, right? And not everybody fits perfectly, and they can be on the board and we can get points. But then there's a point where it's like, man, these people really aren't a fit. I don't know if that's 80% or 60%, but there's a point where it's like, you don't hit enough of these characteristics for us to even consider it. You're off the board. And marketing, I leave to the marketing professionals. So if you redefine your target market, your website's probably good enough today. Would it be better if you redesigned it or refocused it? Yeah, that should be a conversation you have with the marketing support, because you want the leads who come to you from marketing to be congruent with that, right? But if you changed nothing and you just got more disciplined in who you extended a quote to, you would see equal results without having to go change everything right away. So I'd say if you define a target market that's really great for you, you will see an immediate improvement in your sales success. And then you can have your marketing team work with you as you tested and implemented that to refine better over time. Right. And
right.
The way that marketing and over the air stuff has gotten these days, and the level of targeting it should be super easy to say, hey, we figured out that we just really don't sell well to homes that are less than $750,000 in value. Stop targeting any residences that have a lower reported property value than that. Right.
Right. So a lot of marketing, a lot of times for landscapers, focuses around kind of inbound things they can do with their website, with their Google business profile. What are some of the things from a purely sales perspective? If somebody said, I want to go get some more business and I'm really hungry for this, what could they do from a purely sales perspective, from a prospecting perspective, an outbound perspective, to kind of grow their business?
You could ask for referrals. Referrals are the number one business generation thing. And when people tell me they don't get them, I see a very high correlation to the level of people who aren't asking for them. Right.
How common is it, do you see, for people to ask for them? Like
15%, maybe. they kind of operate with the assumption that if they were good enough, these referrals would be given to them all the time, but that's not true, right? What's probably more accurate is that 20% of people will refer you when you do a good job, and 20% of people will never refer you no matter how good of a job you do. And then there's this movable middle of 60% of people that we could get referrals from, but we aren't currently, right? And the other big mistake I see is that people say, well, I just signed them up, so maybe after the season happens, we will get a referral from them, or we could ask for a referral from them. But that is waiting way too long. Have you ever bought a new car, John?
Yeah.
All right. When were you most excited about that car? Was it when you saw it on the website, when you decided to buy it, when you picked it up, or 6 months after?
Yeah, when you pick it up, right after the sale happens.
Actually, when you're driving to it, when they're bringing you the keys, right?
Yeah.
In fact, the moment you start the car and you start driving away, you start to notice little things, right?
Right.
And then by I forget the statistics, 6 weeks after, it's like all of it's gone, all that new car euphoria, right?
Right.
And so, when we make a sale, when somebody says, "I'm going to buy from you," or actually decides that they're going to buy from you, that is the most energetic, the most receptive to giving a positive referral that they could possibly be. They just decided, right? They've imagined this better future. The reality always falls a little flat, right? Now, maybe they're skeptical. Maybe they're not sure if it's going to be as good, but usually not. Usually that's the peak. And my message to landscapers is you should get a referral anytime you add value. But we add value when we give a quote, right? You've heard from our mutual customers or landscapers in general how difficult it is for their customers to even get someone to show up and give them a quote. Handing someone a quote is super valuable. You should get a referral then, right? I've been referred productively from people who have not bought from me. And that conversation is like, "Hey, John, I appreciate the time. I'm not sure that we're a fit. I'd be happy to try and work with you, but honestly, my advice would be you might be happier with a different solution, somebody else. Do you know anybody who would be a better fit for me? And here's what they look like." And that's really valuable for them too, right? Coming alongside them and saying, "I don't think we're the best for you."
So you think you should always be asking for referrals, basically?
I know
it seems
that
like in any non-negative interaction, you should actually ask for a referral.
Even negative ones.
Even negative ones. And that's really contrary to kind of how any business really, regardless of whether you're a landscaping company, a snow removal company.
Changed my life. It's changed my life. I give around 50 presentations a year at different conferences in the industry and outside the industry, at trade shows and colleges and chambers of commerce and you name it. And the end of every single presentation I give, no matter how great it was or how terrible it was, is a request for a referral. And I just have a slide that stands there. Say, "Here's my contact information. I'd love to connect with you. If you found this valuable, best thing you can do is put it into practice and build a better business. That's what I exist to do. But if you want to do more, you can refer me to speak." And then I talk about the fact that I talk to industry associations at the local, state, national, and international level. I have a passion for the trades, and I'd love to be in contact with any group of people who would like business education. If you know someone and you send them an email to introduce me, you'd be helping me help a bunch of other people. And I've only been called petty once in 5 years of doing it. And it's the only thing that I do, John, for my business. My website is woefully outdated. I have never spent one penny on marketing in a traditional sense.
So in practical terms, for the average landscaper who's out there, they're the owner operator, they might have a small crew. What should they be doing? When should they be asking for a referral? They literally hand or email the quote and just in their email signature say,
I would never email a quote. I would always present it at least on the phone, if not video chat, if not in person. And from the very first meeting, I would say, "Look, I love to work with companies that are doing this, right? My ideal client is this. It seems like you're close. I'd love to explore it. by the way, do you know anybody else who might fit that bill? If you really want to get good, right? If you really want to take this to the next level, you could go on their LinkedIn profile. You could find 10 people who seem like they'd be a target client for you that are connected to them, secondary connections. You could print off their names and photos and say, hey, John, I was hoping you could help me with something important. You would say, of course. I'd say, look, I went on your LinkedIn. I saw that you're connected to these 10 people. I was just curious, are any of them actual relationships that you have? Or are they, I'm sure some of them are just people you met once and don't really know. Would you mind circling the 3 people that you are actually connected with who you think might be interested in talking with me? And then you can send, I can send them an introduction and make you a part of that if you're willing to. Who's going to say no to that?
Right.
1 in 5 people, 1 in 4 people.
Right.
But here's the thing. Nobody wants to do the work, right? So at those presentations, anytime I talk with a salesperson, I've put people through sales academies. I've trained them up. I've worked with people for months or years, and they go, I got to get in front of more people. I go, hey, I've got I don't even know, 7,000, 8,000 LinkedIn connections from several different careers or lives, right? Like right now, I am connected to hundreds, if not thousands of property managers still. Go through my LinkedIn and tell me who you want to be introduced to, and I will gladly introduce you. Nobody's ever asked me for it. They don't want to do the real hard work. They just want the easy introduction. Like, yeah, Neil, who in your network? What? You want me to go through my Rolodex and pull out people and then introduce you? You won't even go through it yourself? No. I'm not working for you. I'm happy to help you. Right? But we don't work that hard at getting referrals, and then we're surprised we don't get enough.
Gotcha. Okay. So I think very few landscapers actually do ask for referrals.
Right.
Right. And, most of them are probably not going to go on. A lot of them are not on LinkedIn, especially the smaller owner operators.
Why
right?
not?
Would you say they should be on LinkedIn?
Yeah, you should be on LinkedIn. It's a whole website. It's a whole connection place meant for doing business. What are you going to do? Post on Facebook?
Even if they're going after residential and they're not going after commercial, you would still say they should be on LinkedIn.
Well, who is the ideal customer for a residential landscaper?
Well, usually somebody with more money.
Yeah, a professional.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Who's on what?
LinkedIn.
So
yeah.
LinkedIn.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, get on LinkedIn, man.
Right. Okay. Right? So get on LinkedIn, ask for referrals every time you're delivering any kind of value or even no value.
Yes.
Any other ways to kind of get referrals? Should it be like, I know a lot of people who will put it in their email signature. We can always value a referral.
I don't think when I see that, I ignore it.
Okay.
Right. Personally. My realtor who sold me this home, she has that on every message. I ignore it, man. I'm not interested. But when she comes to me and says, hey, Neil, I saw that you're connected on LinkedIn to this person. Would you refer me to them? Hey, Neil, who do you know who is pregnant or trying to grow their family? Would you refer me to them? Well, that's a specific ask, and I'm happy to help you. If it's just in your LinkedIn, if it's just in your email signature, I don't think that that's important. I am not considering that my referral is beneficial to you. Again, I don't work for you. These people don't work for you. Their job is not to pick up on these little cues. You should sit down with them and say, hey, John, I have something important that I would like to talk to you about. My entire business is built on referrals. Who do you know that's like this? And would you introduce me to them? People love to help other people. The only problem with this whole strategy is that 2, maybe, or 3 out of 5 are going to say, no, I'm not interested, or no, I don't know anybody like that. As long as you can be okay being told no the majority of the time, but you don't let it stop you from asking, this will revolutionize your business.
But that stands for a lot of sales in general. As long as you're okay with no,
it does.
It'll help you grow your business.
And that's why we can't just teach people the skill of asking for referrals. they have to have this sales DNA. They have to have certain things that they're okay with, like being told no most of the time.
Does it have to be in your DNA, or can't you just kind of create that by doing it enough where it becomes okay and acceptable to you as a person? Because a lot of people don't like sales.
No,
right?
Most people
sales. Yeah. And so is there a way to kind of overcome that innate cringe when it comes to sales and become a great salesperson?
Yeah, we can practice getting comfortable with the uncomfortable. We can try things out. We can grow in it, but it is a lot harder than if you already got it already, right? So I have a sales guy that I'm coaching right now. And one of the recurring conversations that we keep having is just how expensive landscape services are, right? And he is on the side of the homeowner. We're charging them too much. We're making too much money. We should give them a discount. Now, the homeowner hasn't said this. He's just assuming. No matter how many times we coach, I can't convince him that $10,000 is not a lot of money, right? For him, $10,000 is so much money. And the fact that somebody would spend it on poop and put it in their yard is craziness, right? I tell him every week, no, it's not, man. People do it all the time. Golf courses spend 6 figures on this stuff, right? Just to walk on. They're like, you have to, I can't outdo his parents' teaching. His parents raised him that way. It's not his fault. It's not my fault. It just is. But can I move that needle? Not really, man. Not in a meaningful way for a long term. I can get him excited for a week. We can work on it, but until he actually comes to believe that $10,000 isn't too much money, $10,000 is going to be too much money.
How do you change mindset? Is it possible? Or at that point, do you just say, it's time for you to go find somebody to delegate this to who's actually a born salesperson?
Yeah, I think there's a cut. Now, I will say that you don't have to have like a perfect mindset, right? You just have to have a good enough one. If you really want, like we have the CD or the the track, the MP3s that you can listen to. You can try and sort of self-hypnotize yourself and just surround yourself with the affirming beliefs and listen to them on repeat. And we can practice in the moment and talk about different visual or auditory or sensory cues to help remind you. And we can practice it. We can improve. But by the time you're in your mid-20s, we lose kind of our neuroplasticity. I mean, you don't walk outside thinking, what color will the sky be today? You're pretty sure it's going to be blue. And if I told you it was green, you're probably going to tell me I'm crazy. Right.
Right.
And so we can modify a little bit. We can work on behaviors. We can put things in terms that you understand. But I think that your beliefs are either enabling or limiting to an extent. We all have them. You don't have to be perfect. But if you really have only a bunch of limiting beliefs when it comes to selling, then I'm not sure that you'll be successful at it.
Gotcha. So how do you help the average landscaper who's trying to figure out, hey, do I try to get better at this, or do I go find somebody to delegate this to? Like, how do you kind of where's the cutoff between, yeah, we can probably move the needle enough versus you should get out of this hat. This shouldn't be a hat you're wearing.
Yeah, we use an assessment. It's a really good tool. It's been around for 30 years. I didn't create it. I'm not that smart. But we just take a test and we see where they score. And we get a rank of them compared to millions of salespeople who have taken this over the last 3 decades. And we say, hey, here's where you stand in terms of the sales willingness, the sales DNA, and the sales competencies. And if you sold 500,000 last year with coaching, then we think you can get to X. Is that going to make you happy? Is that going to serve the needs for the business? And if they say, yeah, then we can move forward with coaching. And if they say not really, then we need to go hire somebody else. So it's kind of like an MRI for sales talent. We just take the test, figure out where we need to go with some real good science, and then make a plan to address it for what our outcomes or goals are going to be.
Got it. Okay. So I want to circle back to something we talked about before when I said emailing the quote, and I saw you cringe.
Oh, don't do it.
So what should that say? Once you kind of have that initial meeting, you walk around the property, find out from the homeowner what they're looking for.
Yeah.
What should that next step be?
Well, before we get to that step, there's three things that have to happen, right? Or there's three things we need to make sure are present. One is we have to understand their need to buy, right? So why are you talking to me? Why is it important that you change from the existing solution? Because everybody has an existing solution, right? There's somebody who cut this grass last week, right? So what's your compelling reason to buy? And on a scale of 1 to 10, is it actually compelling? Like, I have to have this. You're going to buy it no matter what, regardless of the price. Or is this just, you're fishing for quotes and you're hoping to save $10 a week, right? Which would be like a 1.
Mm-hmm.
And so scale 1 to 10, what's your compelling reason to buy? Number 2, what is your budget? How much do you want to spend on this? So funny. I was talking with a guy just yesterday on a discovery call for some coaching. I said, have you thought about a budget or what this might cost? He goes, I really haven't, Neil. I go, that's cool, man. Let's talk about, what you want to accomplish in terms of time. And we came up with a 3-day training for 10 managers and some assessments and some ongoing support. And I said, hey, so for that type of scope, I'd probably ask for about 20 grand. What do you think? And he said, well, I was thinking between 15 and 25. So that's probably well, why didn't you tell me you were thinking between 15 and 25 when I asked you what your budget was? Right. So that it exists, even when they say it doesn't, is my point. And then the third thing is, what's their decision-making process? So how are you going to decide on who to go with? I'm one opportunity. Are you going to consider others? If mine's good enough, are you happy? Are you getting multiple quotes? When are you making a decision? Who besides yourself is involved in the decision-making process? What are your qualifications or rankings to make a decision, right?
Right.
If we have, on a scale from 1 to 10, at least 7s in each of the 3 categories, then I think we're in a pretty good place to win the sale. That's my go, no go cutoff. And it's highly qualitative for you and your market and your business. But on a scale of 1 to 10, do they have a compelling reason to buy from you? Yes. On a scale from 1 to 10, have you figured out their budget range and is it supportive of what you're going to propose? 7 or better, it's a yes. And then do you know when they're going to make a decision? Do you know who's going to be making the decision and how they're going to make the decision? And are they committing to that timeline? If that's a 7 out of 10, we have those answers and they're supportive of what we're going to do. And then we can move to a quote. Now, when we move to a quote, I train my salespeople to, before they send the quote, call up that decision maker and ask a couple more questions and recheck the need to buy, the budget, and the decision. So usually what that sounds like is, hey, and by the way, at this point, I'm probably getting a voicemail, right? Like you're not answering the phone when I call. But I'm going to say, hey, John, it's Neil. I'm just about to finalize the quote. I have a couple questions for you before I can send it over. Please give me a call back. And then you call me back and I say, great. John, thanks for calling me. Here's my questions. I'm covering this, and this in the job because that's what we talked about, correct? You say, yeah. I go, great. Right now, my quote is saying $9,472. Does that seem reasonable to you? And just like you picked up on the fact how much I hate that question by how I cringed, as a salesperson, you'll pick up on how close you are to making a sale for a budget, even if
so you do like a soft quote before you actually send over the quote.
Yes.
Just to gauge their reaction. If they're
100%.
like, oh my God, that's incredibly high. You might change the scope, get the price down.
Let's talk about it now. Right? Because as soon as I send the quote, 2 things happen. One is I can't change it unless you specifically ask me to. And 2 is I lose all the power. Once I've given you exactly what you wanted, which is a quote, if you're interested, then you sign it. If you're not, I'm dead to you. Right? So if I'm going to send it, then I want to make sure it's as perfect as possible for what you want. And if you tell me, Neil, way off base, dude, I'm only interested in spending $3,000 or less, and I don't come to believe that I can even put forth a quote, then guess what I'm not going to do? I'm not going to send a quote. I'm going to say thanks, but no thanks. Sorry, I couldn't help you.
So you're really looking for reasons not to give a quote. They've got to be above a 7.
Yeah.
And then they've got to confirm the budget that you already defined up front. You already got the budget up front.
How long does it take you to make a quote? It takes me like an hour.
Yeah.
No matter how much automation I have.
Right.
I still spend an hour on like every quote. Do you in your business?
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, our landscapers do too, if not 2 hours, right?
Right.
And then what happens once you send a quote? It's open, right? Your CRM is like, hey, this is open.
Yeah.
And so what happens next? 5 reminders, a bunch of voicemail jail, right? Like unanswered emails, follow-ups, questions about what jobs you're going to be working on. Like if you add up the cumulative time, not to mention energy and emotion, but just the cumulative time, I think you spend like 5 hours on quotes and follow-ups no matter what.
So you're really only giving quotes to prospects who are kind of the perfect fit.
Yeah.
Essentially.
Personally, I only try and give a quote to someone who's already going to buy from me.
So that essentially makes you have a really high closing rate, but a lower percentage of prospects who you're actually getting a good quote.
It's so hard to get a quote from me. Like personally, my policy is if you want a quote, you have to ask me 3 times. I'll tell you how much I'll charge you. I'll tell you what we might do. But if you want a quote, man, that's a high bar. I got to be you have to convince me that you're ready to purchase this if I'm going to take the time to put a quote together. Because it's a time suck, man.
Would you recommend that for landscapers or lawn care companies who are selling a smaller ticket item or a smaller ticket maintenance approach?
My very first sale in the industry was door-to-door $20 lawn cuts. $20 a week lawn cuts in Metro Detroit. And what happened when I was doing that, I'll never forget. I walked up to this house, a woman answered the door, and the conversation was like, it's a lot of money, Neil. I really got to talk with my husband about this. Can you come back with a quote and we can sit down and really, really figure it out? And I had to have 2 meetings, 2 decision makers, more than we budgeted, like a hard won sale, right? On a $20 lawn cut. My last sale in the industry was a piece of paper that was worth more than $5 million for a portfolio of snow contracts across the Northeast. Guess what they said? Hey, this is really more than we budgeted. Hey, we really want you to talk with our supervisor. Can you come back with a quote and sit down? It was the same process, John. Same process for a $20 sale and a $5 million sale. It's always more than they expect. It's always more than they want. There's always an objection. There's always other decision making. Like, it doesn't matter what the price is. It's, do you want to be efficient at sales? Now, if the question is, well, I can't sell enough at $20 a cut to be efficient enough to pay for the time I'm investing in sales, well, that's a different conversation about your target then and what's sustainable for the business, right?
Right.
But the sales process, the buying process is the same. If there was a way to build a marketing trap and a website where it just automatically people signed up and you never talked with anybody, you would be so rich. But I just don't think it exists, right? I think the sales component is always part of it. And we can have a supportive funnel and process or an unsupportive one. But despite all the technology, man, most homeowners are not going on and measuring their own lawns and coming up with their own quotes and using a chatbot and buying blind. Not enough for us in our market, wherever that is, I think.
Right. And how does this change if you're selling over the phone? Like you're just looking at a Google map of their property. How does that sales process change if you're trying to avoid having to travel out?
Yeah, I think, so when you're face to face, it's really much easier to pick up on those cues. Mm-hmm. Over the phone is more difficult, right? You don't get to see their facial expressions. You're relying on tone to signal that stuff. So your ability to communicate is lower. Now, you may say, for what we're selling, I can't afford to go physically. And so that's going to have to be good enough. But I would say that if I took the same person and I had them sit on the phone trying to sell one day, and the next day I got them face to face trying to sell, I just had a parade of people who came in and sat down in their office one after another. So that the time was the same, they would be, 10, 20, 30% more successful with the people sitting in front of them physically. That's my gut.
So your gut is that it's whenever possible, you should be doing sales in person.
I mean, if virtual technology like this was so good, then nobody would ever pay me to fly across the country to talk to an audience live. They'd just put me on a screen at a movie theater. But we did that during COVID. And we all collectively decided, hey, this really sucks. There's no personal connection here.
Right.
Right. The technology drops off. We're not communicating the same way. We should stop that and go back to spending hundreds of thousands of dollars for tens of thousands of people to travel to a central location and be together physically in person. Phone's a nice tool to shortcut that, but usually the way that I'm using phone for commercial or residential sales is a 5 to 15 minute screening, trying to make sure that this person is on the dartboard and then getting in person.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
So I want to shift gears and talk about how can landscaping businesses maximize or increase the customer lifetime value of their customers.
Yeah.
I hear a lot of stories of, somebody has a lawn care client and then they find somebody else is doing a landscaping project
Sure.
they're just not even aware of all the services
Yeah.
that the company offers. So
Yeah.
how can landscapers do a better job of kind of getting as much business from their existing customers as possible?
Yeah, I think back to my early days when I was working for the small landscaper in Detroit, we had the same problem, right? We offered like 12 distinct services, and we were doing 1 or 3 per customer, not 5 or 7. And we had a good suspicion that they were buying all of them. And so we did something really simple. We just took a third of a sheet. I mean, this is back when we were sending paper invoices, right? 2010. But we just took a 1/3 paper sheet and dropped it in their invoice and mail it to them. And all that said was, hey, John, thank you for being a customer. You may or may not be aware we offer more services than what you're currently buying. Here's a list of 12 that we offer. If you have any need for them at your home, could you please check off the ones that you do and send it back with your payment? And we will come out and talk with you or give you a quote for those and give you 10% off of that service. And that was highly effective at growing. We actually call it wallet share, right? Lifetime customer value is the total spend over the lifetime of the customer. So wallet share is supportive of lifetime customer value in my world. And so that was one really effective thing. The other thing is for lifetime customer value specifically, I would focus on automatically renewing or rolling contracts. So there's this weird thing that a lot of people do where their contract ends and they have to send a renewal. And then who knows if you get it or not. It just creates a decision point that doesn't need to. And it's perfectly legal and super easy to just put people on a recurring basis. And so I've paid for services, like my accounting service did this for me, where they said, hey, Neil, we're your accounting service. If you ever don't like us, you just let us know and, we'll terminate. But other than that, we're your accounting service for life. And so this agreement's for 12 months. And then after that, it goes again for 12 months and it does that forever. And by the way, every year your price goes up 3%. I was happy to sign that. Right. And so I would create rolling contracts with automatic price increases, show it to the customer, let them know it's going to happen. They're not going to argue it. And if they do, then you can negotiate it back. Right. It's not a problem, right. But it should be easy to sign up again. 70% of people with something like that. And then, the last thing is just, do you really know your customer? Do you have a relationship with them? Do you know how they prefer to communicate and when? Do you know if they want a phone call or a text message or an email or a home visit, and on what frequency? And do you know what's going on in their life, right? Are you suggesting, hey, I know your kids are getting a little bit older. Would you like a fire pit out here now? Or are you just waiting for them to come to that conclusion themselves? Because the way that, most people are buying is not, oh yeah, I wonder if my landscaper does that too. What they're doing is they're at their friend's house and they're going, man, this fire pit is awesome. I need one. Who's your guy?
Right. And so you want to proactively get in there and upsell to other services.
Yeah.
And make it come from you.
It's not aggressive or weird. It's just, you got to stay in front and remind them that's what you do.
Right.
And when usually the way that conversation goes is, oh, I had no idea that you did that. Right. Not, oh, I knew you did that and I don't like you enough to do it. I don't trust you enough to. That's not usually the conversation.
Right.
Right. So, but it's hard to make a quality upsell if you don't know where they're all about. And so in my world of sales coaching, when I get hired to say hire a salesperson for someone. I go, hey man, love to hire a salesperson. Let's move forward. And then our first call is a discovery call again, right? Even though you just bought. And that discovery call is, all right, John, we're going to hire you an A plus salesperson. But before we do that, tell me about your comp structure. Tell me about your payroll systems. Tell me about your sales coaching system. Tell me about your onboarding system, right? And any holes we discover are upsell opportunities for me or somebody else. Not like I'm trying to get more money, but knowing that I can provide a much better service for you, and my business tends to flourish the more value that I give to people.
Got it. Makes sense. So the last thing I wanted to touch on, and that was really great advice, was for the landscaping company who's mostly doing residential, how can they get more commercial clients? What's the best approach for that? And we talked about LinkedIn, and this seems like a great approach for using the LinkedIn network of your customers.
Yeah.
Is there anything else you would recommend for landscapers that want to do more commercial work? And especially like commercial work is a lot more, commercial snow removal is a lot more attractive now for landscapers than residential. What can landscapers do to get more commercial work?
So here's the easy way to do it, right? You call the business, and the way that this phone call goes with a gatekeeper is, hey, John, it's Neil. I have kind of a weird question, and I was hoping you could help me out. And this is the receptionist, right? The person who answers the phone, the operator. Hey, John, it's Neil. I have kind of a weird question. I was hoping you could help me out. Their response is usually, sure. What's your question? Or I can try. And I say, I know that you already have a snow service in place. I'm curious who decides on what company that you hire for that. Sometimes it's a facility manager. Sometimes it's a property manager. If it's a small enough place, maybe it's the owner. Do you have any idea who I might talk to about this? And then they give me the name of the decision maker, and then I ask to be transferred. And all I say to them is, hey, you have a service right now. I'm looking to expand my market share, my customer base here. Seems like you might be a good fit based on location and size. Do you have any interest at all in exploring an alternative, or is your snow removal service completely perfect and you're totally happy? And the response is typically, well, I wouldn't say totally happy, or I wouldn't say perfect. Well, tell me about that. Let's talk about it. And then we should have a conversation.
You're just looking for that little opening and framing it as perfectly happy, the perfect service.
Yeah.
Is there any room in there? Right.
That's it. And it's very simple. It's low key. And there are people who tell you it is perfect. I remember one time I called a mall, which is since defunct, but I called the guy and he goes, look, Neil, I appreciate what you're trying to do. I used to be in sales a little bit. I get it. He goes, you got to know that the guy who physically constructed this mall has been the snowplow provider since it was constructed back in the 70s. And we have to use liquids here. And this is before people were using liquids. And he says, that guy went out and bought all the equipment, and no, he's not perfect, but we love him and we're never, ever going to change. And I go, I just want to get this straight. The only way that I personally would ever have a shot is if this guy dies or retires. And the guy kind of chuckled. He goes, yeah, that's the case. No problem. And every year, April 1st, I would call this guy and I'd say, hey man, just want to make sure that you had a good winter. Your contractor, I knew the guy's name at the time. I go, that he hasn't retired or died. And for 7 years, I made that phone call. And it was this big joke. We loved it. We all look forward to it, right? Oh, Neil, I knew you were going to call me and ask, like you do every year. He goes, no, he's still good. But if it ever changes, the job is yours. I made the sale before there was an opportunity to, right?
Right.
Now the mall went out of business before I ever got it. But that guy was like 60 years old.
I thought you were going to say on the 8th year, you got the business.
He was going to die or retire at some point, right? So my point is that this doesn't have to be, oh, they suck and we're going to change. Like, no, man, you can build a pipeline of people and find that opportunity. I did have a very, very large account. I proposed, I didn't get it. Kind of a similar situation. I went and proposed, I didn't get it. Went out to a 3-year agreement. 3 years went by, I went out again. almost had it, but the guy was retiring. He didn't want to pull the trigger on the new guy because he wanted the new guy to make his own call. 3 more years, right? So my third chance in 7 years, my last year at Case, I did win it. And it was literally a 7-year long sale. And it was worth it. It was in one location, and annual spend was somewhere around $700,000 a year for one massive warehouse.
Yeah.
Totally.
All because of follow-up.
Yeah, and good questions and diving into the numbers and being creative and all kinds of fun stuff. But
staying in touch, staying top of mind.
Staying in touch, yeah. And understanding, like, look, if you're doing this, you're doing this for a long time. And so start calling, call over and over and over again. Probably going to have to call 8 times to connect with one person. That's okay. Probably going to have to touch a prospect 8 times to make a sale. That's okay. Could take several years. That's fine. Just settle in, man, and make those 70, 100, 200 calls a week for whatever activity is going to match up for your goals, and stick with it. And I think sometimes people look at sales and they think good sales is all about being like super slick and convincing people to maybe do something that they wouldn't otherwise do. That's not it. Great sales is all about having the diligence and discipline to do something every day and being really quick to move on when someone's not a good fit.
That's great. Right. So, Neil, how can our listeners learn more about your services? Where can they go?
Best place to go is LinkedIn. My name's Neil Glatt, NEALGLATT. I do have a website, neilglatt.com. You can also just email me, neil@neilglatt.com, or you could text or call me at my cell, 805-340-9311.
Awesome. Neil, thank you so much for joining me on the Landscapers Business Growth Podcast. It was a fascinating conversation. I love talking about sales for the landscaping industry, and thank you again.
Cool. Thanks, John.